Now I know that you fear God. The book of Genesis, chapter 22, verse 12, the testing of Abraham. In brief, passage. Book of Genesis, chapter 16, verse 1 through chapter 22, verse 19. Theme, sacrifice. Setting, early 2nd millennium BC, Beersheba and the region of Moriah, a 3-day donkey ride from Beersheba. Key figures. Abraham, son of Terah, an ordinary man who becomes the father of Ishmael and Isaac. Sarah, Abraham's wife, mother of Isaac. Hagar, Sarah's maidservant and mother of Abraham's firstborn Ishmael, Isaac, son of Abraham and Sarah. The demand God makes of Abraham to sacrifice his own son is one of the most extreme tests of faith in the Bible. The fact that Abraham's son Isaac is the long-awaited child of promise makes the sacrifice even harder to fulfill. At the start of Abraham's story, when God first tells him to set out into the unknown, he promises to make of him a great nation, implying Abraham will have many descendants. He later promises Abraham offspring as numerous as the dust of the earth. Despite God's promises, after many years of marriage, Abraham and his wife Sarah remain childless. When Abraham complains to God about his plight, God's reply is to tell him to look up at the bright sky. His descendants would be as numerous as the stars. Abraham's belief in God is firm, but when there is no child, Sarah in desperation proposes her maidservant Hagar as a surrogate. Through this union, Abraham gains a son, Ishmael, but Sarah remains childless. Then, at long last, with Sarah well past normal childbearing age, the miracle happens. Isaac is born. This is the child through whom the whole world would be blessed. The child Isaac. When Isaac is old enough to carry heavy loads and ask questions, God makes an astonishing demand of Abraham. God calls Abraham, who replies, "Here I am," the usual reply to a divine call in the Bible. God says, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go into the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Book of Genesis, chapter 22, verse 2. The description of Isaac as Abraham's only son, even though he has another son, Ishmael, underlines Isaac's role as the inheritor of Abraham's covenant with God. For Christians, God asking Abraham to kill his only son mirrors God's later sacrifice of his own son, Jesus. God's use of the imperative go occurs only in one other place of the Bible when God tells Abraham to go from his father's house and country to the land of Canaan, chapter 12, verse 1, a huge personal sacrifice. The now elderly Abraham, according to Genesis, he was 100 years old when Isaac was born, is being asked to perform another act of faith and set out on another journey into the unknown by making the second sacrifice. As before, Abraham is prompt to obey God. Rising early the next morning, he saddles his donkey, cuts some wood to make a fire for the burnt offering, chooses 2 young followers to accompany him and Isaac, and sets off from Beersheba. After 3 days of traveling, they see in the distance the place chosen by God for the sacrifice. Father and son bid farewell to the 2 followers and set out on the last lap of the journey alone. The 2 of them went on together. Chapter 22, verse 6. In a touching gesture of fatherly care, Abraham gives Isaac the wood to carry, while he himself takes the more dangerous flame torch, or perhaps firestone and knife. The silence as they walk is easy to imagine. After a while, Isaac speaks. "Father?" "Yes, here I am," replies Abraham for the second time in the story. "The fire and wood are here," says Isaac, "but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham replies, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." Chapter 22, verse 8. Abraham's speech here shows that despite the enormity God asks, he still trusts God to provide for him. When father and son reach the designated place, Abraham builds an altar from stone, takes the wood his son has been carrying, places it on top of the altar. He binds Isaac, hence the Jewish name for this story, the Akedah, from the Hebrew word Akedat Yitzhak, binding of Isaac, and places him on top of the wood, ready for the sacrifice. Abraham reaches out his hand and takes the knife to start the process. At this moment, a voice cries urgently to him from heaven, "Abraham! Abraham!" for the third time in the story. Abraham replies, "Here I am," the repetition highlighting his unwavering faithfulness. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," says the voice. "Do not do anything to him. I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Chapter 22, verse 12. To fear God in the Bible is not so much an emotion of terror, but rather a profound respect for God, implying obedience and trust. Many Hebrew words for fear also mean reverence and respect. Abraham's trust and obedience shows he respects God's will. Earlier, Abraham told Isaac that God would provide a lamb for their burnt offering. The Hebrew for provide is the same as the word for see. When Abraham looks up, he sees a ram in a nearby thicket. Abraham takes the ram and offers it in place of his son. Genesis tells us that he named the place "The Lord Will Provide," chapter 22, verse 14, suggesting a place where God revealed himself or let himself be seen. By faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. The book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 17. Offerings to the Lord. Burnt offerings were common to most ancient religions in the Middle East. The meat was burned on an altar, smoke rising as a pleasing odor to the deity or deities. Once religious rituals had become established among the Israelites, such offerings were made morning and evening in the Jerusalem temple, along with offerings of grain and drink. The Israelites also believed that firstborn males should be offered to God. The first offspring to open the womb among the Israelites belongs to me, whether human or animal. The Lord tells Moses in Exodus chapter 13, verse 1. Scholars believe the ancient Israelites, in common with the neighboring peoples such as Phoenicians and Egyptians, practiced child sacrifice, though it had ceased among the Israelites by the 7th or 6th century BC. Instead, parents made burnt offerings of animals to redeem their firstborn sons. There is an echo of abolition of child sacrifice among the Israelites in the story of Abraham and Isaac. Though your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you've obeyed me. Genesis chapter 22, verse 18. A multitude of blessings. So far, God has blessed Abraham 6 times in Genesis. The voice from heaven now pronounces God's 7th and final blessing upon him. I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. The covenant contained in the blessing is threefold. Yet again, God swears to make Abraham's offspring numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Chapter 22, verse 17. God promises to give Abraham's descendants victory in the face of their enemies. In addition, God promises to bless the entire world through them. After receiving their blessing, even the blessing, Abraham rejoins his followers and they make their way home. A symbolic death. Some commentators view the ordeal of Isaac as an initiation rite involving a symbolic process of death and rebirth. In many cultures across the world, young men are put through an ordeal in which it seems for a while they will die. The purpose of the shock and terror of this experience is to prepare them for real death when it comes. It also creates a rupture with childhood. Their symbolic death and rebirth, the young men leave their parents in infancy to take on the responsibilities of adulthood. In many ways, the story of Isaac's new sacrifice fits this pattern. Father and son both undergo an ordeal. For Abraham, it is the last test in the life of faith and obedience to God, leading to a culminating blessing or covenant. After this, his life's journey is nearly done. The blessing passes to Isaac, the next link in the patriarchal and covenantal chain. And the scriptures is fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend. The book of James chapter 2, verse 23. Festivals of remembrance. Both Jews and Muslims celebrate annual festivals that remember Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son. For Jews, it is Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and for Muslims, the festival of Eid al-Adha. At Rosh Hashanah, the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac in Genesis chapter 22, is one of the key Torah readings for the feast. It is invoked in one of the feast's special prayers. In this, God is asked to remember the merciful promise he made to Abraham on Mount Moriah, where Abraham suppressed his fatherly love in order to do your will. The ritual blowing of the shofar, or Ram's trumpet, is linked to the ram. For Muslims, Eid al-Adha, festival of the sacrifice, commemorates Abraham's conditional submission to God, but in Islam it is Ishmael, ancestor of the Arabs, rather than Isaac, whom Abraham must sacrifice.